So it's 11 o'clock. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate the time out of your day. We're excited, of course, to provide, sorry, we're excited, of course, to provide a presentation here, explain our product Asset Clarity, which is built on the ServiceNow platform. We have our resident expert, Steve Mifsud, who's here to present. If there's any questions, please feel free to use the question and answer portal. I'll also pose the questions over to Steve so that he can address them on the call. Certainly don't want this to be a monologue. If there's any questions from anyone, please feel free to ask them. We want this to be engaging and valuable for everybody that's on the call. Again, really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day. Steve, did you want to give a bit of an intro of yourself?
Sure, thanks, Sean. Yeah, no, thank you very much. So, yeah, I want to welcome everybody and, taking the time out of your day. We deliberately chose today as a day for the webinar to not conflict with any soccer games or football games that are out there. A little bit about myself. So, as Sean alluded to, Steve Mifsud. So, I've been in the IT space for over 25 years. 22 of those years been focusing on ITAM and ITSM products and delivery, and 15 of those years directly with ServiceNow. Working through since the Calgary release. I came over to Coreio about 6 years ago, and this is where we started up our ServiceNow practice. And so I've been happy that we achieved the goals that we have done. Personally, I've focus on, as I alluded to earlier, ITSM and asset management, and this is where this application was built to help with this kind of capability, and we're going to walk through that. Um, First of all, I wanted to give a little bit of a backdrop on what Coreio and our ServiceNow practice is. Um, Coreio is an elite partner, and we'll continue to echo that. Is actually one of the fastest growing partners to achieve elite status. The elite status is probably the highest tier you can get unless you're a global partner in the ecosystem, and we're very quick to achieve that status, and we're very proud of that. As you can see from the slide that's presented, we have a diverse team focusing on many different products and modules within the ServiceNow ecosystem. Every single one of our ServiceNow individuals, everything from a developer to a QA analyst to a project manager, has to be a ServiceNow system administrator at the least. And as you can see, we've done quite a bit of developments, and we're very proud of our CSAT score, one of the highest in the Canadian market for boutique type shops. When you start to look at our ServiceNow, we'll get into some of our offerings and then the Asset Clarity application itself and how we got to the Asset Clarity application very shortly. But some of the areas that we really want to discuss here is, we've been recognized by Gartner as one of the top implementation partners in North America. And that was a survey that came out, and if I can gladly share that if you like. And then as far as ServiceNow expertise, we're focused obviously, as every partner is, in ITSM, but we also focus on ITOM, CSM, SecOps, asset management, and we'll talk about some of the other capabilities that we have. As far as our ServiceNow partnership, first and foremost, we are a ServiceNow reseller. We have the ability to sell ServiceNow licensing like every ServiceNow partner, and we continue to do so. We do offer some perks of financing where we've been able to finance licenses for organizations that prefer to pay a monthly rate rather than an annual rate, and we've done that. Of course, we're a services partner. We do complete implementations, everything from a module like an ITSM deployment or a CSM deployment, and everything down to as little as deploying a catalog for some of for our customers, where we've been identified as the preferred partner. We do staff augmentation. We have many different models of staff augmentation. The most popular that's used by our customers is what we call resource on demand. And what we have here is basically as an agreement and a SAL that's with an organization that enables them to at any point make a request for a developer, an architect, a QA analyst for a couple of hours, a couple of days, or even a couple of months. And as the utilization of the hours, it helps to reduce the cost as per hour for each individual, which makes it more cost effective. Uh, we on the provider side, we have really two offerings. One is our MSP offering, which is really meant for the SMB market, for organizations that can't meet that minimal ACV within ServiceNow. We offer the MSP that is really a slice of a larger ServiceNow instance and being able to leverage ServiceNow for those customers that cannot afford that ACV. And then we have, similar to the MSP, we have the provider mindset. Sorry, the platform support. The platform support is actually where we do a managed service of a dedicated instance. And we've doing this for a couple of customers where we come in, we do your release management, your administration, your support, continuous improvement, bug fixes. And so we offer a fully managed service of your dedicated instance. So you can actually focus on continuing to grow your service now rather than worrying about the day-to-day maintenance of it. And last, and why we're actually here, is actually our technology partnership. Our technology partnership really enables us to be able to build applications within the store. ServiceNow has a store very much similar to iTunes Store and Android Store for phones. There is a ServiceNow store, and I'll actually just quickly jump to it in the other screen here. And it's a store at servicenow.com. If you go in there, and the app that we're going to be talking about is the Coreio Asset Clarity. You can search it. You can click on it. There's more information. If you want to, you can even download it from here, or you can work with us directly to be able to get it to your instance. So what is Asset Clarity? Um, Asset Clarity is an interface and a module that we created on ServiceNow. It has workflow, notification, reporting, a widget that sits in the service portal, your service portal, for users to be able to see their assets. And we'll go through the demonstration of this very shortly. But what are its key benefits? And we'll talk through the presentation on the benefits of this, but really the main ones are you look at it is asset visibility, is creating that transparency of assets to the end users so that the end users now become almost like your discovery agents and being able to update the assets and attest the assets that they currently have. Cost savings. This is generated by that transparency, by forcing people to attest to what they have. Also, what we call proactive asset management, where it forces them to remove assets that are assigned to individuals no longer with your organization, or even the fact to be able to see redundant type assets, where why does individual B have two laptops rather compared to individual A who has one. A cost avoidance. Um, so many times within organizations, hiring of new employees, the automatic trigger is to, procure new assets and new software. This really creates that transparency now that so that an individual, a manager can actually see the assets within their organization, within their department, and being able to actually transfer the assets from one user to another and automatically updating those in ServiceNow. The elimination of repurchasing, my apologies, which then, helps reduce cost. And then robust asset management. How do you make your asset management more accurate? Discovery and HAMPro and SAMPro have done great strides in doing that, but this takes it to the one next level where it's empowering your end users to be able to demonstrate and uh, visualize what they currently have. So the attestation page itself has four key functionalities. Self-service, and we'll walk through and demonstrate each one of these. The ability to force a routine attestation, Proactive asset management, and what that really entails is an automatic workflow and triggers that basically take place when an employee's status has changed. They've either left the organization or they've changed departments. And then validating the billing accuracy as organizations start to turn towards a statement of charge for the lines of businesses from IT. This creates that visibility to the business of what they currently have and what is in their statement of charge so they're able to validate against that. Now, what types of assets could be in scope? Well, when we look at it, we do call it the access clarity tool, but there's all types of different assets and types of things that can be tracked within the module itself. There's access management, software, hardware, telecom, mobile phones, desk phones, Androids, data circuits, and there's even as far as artwork or other consumables that you might want to track that is being tracked in your ServiceNow instance.
Steve, there's just a question from the field. Uh, Hopefully I'm reading this properly, but application is called asset clarity, though they're seeing that access is noted here and on the previous slide. How does this work with items like sale point?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So the aspect there is it's truly the attestation. It can become your one-stop shop for attestation. And SailPoint has an attestation module, but there's no attestation module for asset management. So what we've enabled is actually the capability to integrate with SailPoint, bring the information in, and that could be any type of other applications. In fact, one of our customers is using Okta, and we brought the access from Okta into ServiceNow. And now what the individual is actually doing is they're testing their access, their software, their hardware, their telephony, everything in one-stop shop. So it creates that full transparency view for the individual of a comprehensive of what they have. I could probably make like as one of the use cases we have. We actually had deployed this in a very large organization. And at the time, this was just at the beginning of COVID, they had actually had conferencing bridges before everybody switched over to Teams and other capabilities. And so what they used to do is deploy conferencing bridges to the individuals, and they weren't using Active Directory to be able to manage those in any type way or form. And so when we actually deployed the application, we discovered there was a tremendous amount of conferencing bridges that were actually assigned to individuals that had left the organizations and they were still using those. And in one small quarter, we actually saved $250,000 in this organization just due to the size of individuals that had conferencing bridges that left, were still using them for their personal reasons, and they should have been turned off. This was not a cost savings. Obviously, it's more of a cost avoidance, but it was a significant cost avoidance that we were able to achieve right off the gate. Another scenario is that with another organization that had, they said they had basically an asset management practice to be able to recoup the assets of individuals that had left the organization. We installed the application alongside with them in their service now, and on the day we actually turned it on, we discovered that there was actually 11,000 individuals that had left the organization that had one type of or another asset still assigned to them. We actually had deposit notifications and kind of scaled up at a smaller bandwidth to be able to consume the attestations that were going to come in. But really, we were able to clean up that 11,000 users very quickly and very automated. When we look at assets and how we're affecting them in the life cycle, we're really looking at the green bar there, the green arrow that we're focusing on. So when you think of the asset life cycle here, it's how do you maintain those assets? And now what you're doing is through our widget, you're creating the capability for somebody to actually maintain, retransfer those assets, or even return them to stock so they can actually be redeployment. And that's where you actually can generate a lot of the savings. So let's go through the actual use cases. And the very first one is actually self-service and asset management. And this is we're actually going to get into the first time a demonstration of our asset clarity application. So I'm going to switch screens, and I'm hoping, Sean, you can just confirm for me that you can see my.
Take myself off mute, but I'm sure I can.
Okay. So
And yeah, we're seeing it, Steve.
perfect. I'm just going to turn here slightly because I'm looking at my other screen here. So what you'll see, and I'm going to actually step backwards a bit here. And what you'll see is a very generic service portal. Every organization that leverages ServiceNow uses the service portal and takes, a flavor of this in some form or shape. And what you'll see is we actually added, as part of the installation, the asset clarity option at the very top. Once you click into that, it'll open up a screen, and I'm hoping I'm still logged in. And it'll open up a screen, and you'll see, just for clarity, I'm logged in as Fran Sanders. Now, what is happening here, and I'll go into the administrative module very shortly, but what's happening here is now Fran, who's logging in, can actually see everything that's been exposed to her from the application interface to be able to see any type of access that's assigned to her, any type of hardware, and any type of software. Now, I am going to skip over this red section in the middle here in yellow, and we'll come back to that as that's our second use case. And then Fran can also see any of her direct reports. Um, and from there, you can actually expand that and be able to see everything that your direct reports have assigned to them as well. Now, I am going to go a little bit further into the application here, and you'll see that each of the assets or access or software that's here has options. And this is where the self-service comes in. And I'm going to basically take a look at maybe a computer. And if we want to reassign a computer, we can easily click reassign. And what it's technically doing is actually bringing the catalog item in the back. But what it's done now is actually, populated Fran Sanders because we know who we're transferring from, and it already captured the asset that we're actually transferring. So all we need to do is define who's it going to. And if we selected that and submitted it, it would actually be sent out. The alternate way to actually do that, and I'll just jump to the catalog item, is requesting something. And if somebody has to actually think, okay, what is it, that I want to do? Well, I'm going to reassign an asset. Now I have the service catalog. I got to populate, who's the person that's going to be transferring it, who am I transferring it to? Here's the asset. Here's some comments. So what we've technically done is we simplified the action from a single selection in the attestation page to emulate the catalog item that exists. Now, every option here is leveraging a unique catalog item that exists within the service catalog. That means that if your service catalog item, you have a service catalog item to transfer an asset and it's a fully automated process or it's got approvals. Once I select it from here, it's actually going to leverage that catalog item and all the workflow that's already built. And if your catalog item is simply just a task being created to a fulfillment group to be able to, transfer that asset, it will follow that. And if you automate that catalog item, the application will just inherit that automation automatically. And I'll show you how that's configured shortly. Now, within here, you can search for an employee, any employee. And I'm just going to pick randomly somebody from here, and I could see their assets and their information. Or I can actually look for a specific, oops, sorry. I'm going to look for a specific asset. And the rationale here is I am manager, I am Fran. I have this laptop that's, I'm sitting on my desk. I don't see it in, assigned to me, and it's right now in my ownership. And I want to take, ownership of this asset. So how do I do that? So basically, I would look up the asset tag, and you can look up the serial number, the asset tag, um, and any type of information that's relevant. And basically it comes up, and this asset is actually assigned to Terrence Nimmer. Now, I can go to that asset and I could say, well, I want to reassign it. And I'm going to reassign it. I'm going to reassign it to Fran. Oops. Oh, sorry. Kicked the wrong one. Let's- Of course, we have a glitch in our demonstration. And I'm just going to assign it here for now. And what you'll see is that it actually has come up as a reassignment, and it's been done by Fran. Now, there's a log that actually takes place, and within that log, you'll see that Fran has come into this attestation view, and that she actually transferred this asset to an individual, and you have the ticket number that'll be available to you to be able to see right here, the rhythm that's created. So let me go back to Fran. Now, Fran won't see that asset if it was assigned to her because it won't show up until the asset's actually fully transferred and the work order's complete and the asset repository has been updated. So this is kind of how you see the assets and you see the auditing. Now, I want to be able to go to the interface to be able to show how you add other services or how you remove services. And it's quite simple. This is we call it the Asset Clarity interface, admin interface. There's some basic information and during implementation, all the training is explained on how to leverage this. But in this case today, we're actually going to add server as a hardware cast that we want to see. We'll see right now, we can see printers, mobile device, computers, and monitors. And we're just going to go add servers to this. Oops. Now, server's been added, and I'm going to have to update this page. And I'm going to go back to my attestation page, and I'm going to refresh here so we can actually see. And what you'll actually see now is you'll actually see server's been added. A couple of minutes ago, that wasn't there. And now we actually have a server. Now, it already has a predetermined catalog item to remove. We're actually going to, through the rest of this demonstration, we're actually going to create a catalog item on how to reassign that asset, and I'll show you how that takes place shortly. I'm going to pause here. This is our first use case, the self-service. I was wondering if there was any questions.
Um, Nothing in the Q&A, Steve. Of course, anybody can also pose them verbally, but not in the Q&A, not seeing it in the chat either at this point.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Sean. All right, so our next use case where a lot of the cost savings, cost avoidance come into place is what we call our attestation, is the ability to actually attest. And we recommend an annual attestation, but it can be scheduled quarterly, monthly, or any type of frequency that you want through the interface. I will actually demonstrate to you how it's configured, and then we'll actually see what is involved in that attestation, and then some scenarios of audits that we've actually done in the past. So let me jump back to the attestation page first of all, and I'm going to go through the administration module. Now, the administration module basically gives you the capability to schedule the attestation. In this case, we've scheduled it for annual, which is 365 days. And there is a whole entire notification cycle that goes through the whole entire process. And the first notification would start to come out in 30 days and then 10 days um, and so forth. Now, all the notifications are fully configured by through the interface. And you'll see right now there are no notifications are actually configured. Um, and so that there's no development required for changes to the cycle or to the communications or even to the amount of emails that are being sent out as part of this interface. So there's everything in place that is fully configurable and be able to manage through this admin console. What does attestation look like? In the case of Fran Sanders, And Fran has reaching her, getting close to her 365 days of attestation as required. 30 days before that, she'll actually get an email that states, Fran, you need to go to the attestation page, and here's the link. And she would come in here. Now, Fran would look at her assets and basically be able to make decisions on any type of the assets that there are there, and take action against them. And in the case, she can basically say, well, I have two computers, and oh, I shouldn't have one. And the reason I have one is one's a MacBook, and one's the Microsoft ASUS. So I want to return one. So you can easily return it, and now it kicks off the workflow to return that asset to a warehouse so it can be deployed to somebody else. Once she's happy with what she currently has, she can attest herself. And basically, once in doing so, you're testing that the assets you have are accurately yours, and no further action are required. Once that's done, and I'll actually just take the step and do that, it'll actually reset the date, so that the next attestation is now not due for another year from the current date that it was just completed. Now, Fran can also go down and actually take a look at her staff. And in this, I've done a couple of demos. You can see this. I've attested as Fran Sanders for these individuals. If they haven't done it themselves, as a manager, I can do it, or they should do it themselves. But I would have that visibility to see who's it been completed by, or I can actually go in and do it on their behalf if it's coming due. And very simply, the same type of workflow to be able to do that. Now, one thing I'll note is on the right-hand side of those attestations, you'll actually see everything is green. Now, in the case of somebody that's only done a partial attestation, and then what I mean in this case, Sandra had done an attestation, but since she attested, she actually onboarded a new mobile device. So you actually see that it's the attested, it's in a red circle. It doesn't mean her attestation is due. We don't recommend to attest every time an employee gets a new asset because that can be quite cumbersome. But basically, it's just showing that the assets that have been onboarded since the last time they attested. Now, any person can go and attest at any time ahead of their 365 days, even if they wanted to do it at 6 months. But basically, what happens is now the clock starts over again for them for 365 days from the day that they attested.
Steve, we got a question. Question is, can you automatically schedule asset retirement? So as an example, every 4 years, and what is still assigned to someone? Would it still be linked to an assigned person, or would it not show up in the active inventory list?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer the second half of that question first. So, assets that are returned and basically no longer in the possession of the individual, they're now assigned to a virtual warehouse or a warehouse. They no longer show up here. So the premise is that the asset is active and assigned to an individual, and that's how it shows up here. With regards to a refresh, absolutely. We have created it for, we don't have it in our demo instance, but we have created it for one of our customers that once an asset has reached a threshold, and I'm going to make this up, if a laptop is going to be refreshed after 3 years, an extra option will be shown up here to basically refresh. And now they have the option to go in, oh, I want to refresh my laptop. And you can trigger notifications to be able to go now, Fran, your laptop. Actually, I picked mobile device. Your let's use your Apple MacBook is up for a refresh. She would go in here and she would trigger the refresh process, which would then open up the catalog item that exists within the service catalog. And now the refresh process starts taking place. That catalog item, that option in the refresh would not be shown if it was like 2 years into the life cycle of that asset. It would only be displayed once it was ready for a refresh. I'm hoping I answered that question.
I'm sure we'll get feedback shortly. No feedback yet,
Okay,
but I'll let you know, Steve.
sure. So I wanted to give a scenario of a sample attestation that we recently did. And picked a department in an organization of 1,842 employees. And within the first 3 months of the starting up the attestation. And what we, just for reasons why we don't send out 1,842 all at once, we always recommend to start an attestation from a tiering level. So your organization, think of it as a pyramid, and your CEO is at, level one, and then as it works down, the organizational structure, those are different levels. And so what we always recommend is to start with the bottom level first. And so some organizations are, 8 levels deep, some are 13, 15 levels deep. So start with that lowest level first, and then let that run for a couple of weeks, and then go up to the next level. And the rationale there, and if I click in here, if you're traveling with that, that you're actually, in Fran's case, you would have actually sent an attestation to her direct reports first, so that when Fran actually got her attestation to do, she would have came in here and seen those that have completed it or those that haven't completed it and what actions need to be taken. Now she can either decide to do it on her own on their behalf, or she actually can ping, Devin and say, Devin, why haven't you done the attestation? You need to do so. But she would have that visibility. One thing I did miss during the attestation notifications, once it's past due, it actually starts to escalate to the person's manager. So in the case of Devin, if he didn't do his attestation, now it would actually start to go to Fran to be able to say that Fran, Devin didn't do his attestation and you need to follow up with him. So in this sample audit of 1,842, we had 912 people complete their attestations. We had an 8% reduction in laptops and desktops. And we also had a 9% reduction in telephones and voicemails. In this organization, we had the telephones and voicemails configured as assets that they were tracking. So an annual impact of nearly $70,000 was performed here. Now, when you think about this, the amount of users that actually performed their asset attestation and the amount of actually savings that was generated, that comes out to about $73, or 73 and a half dollars per individual annually. Now, when you start to think of the cost of the application, the asset clarity application, and it's a fraction of this cost. So you can see the ROI is returned very, very quickly. Now, if you think of this in a large organization of about 50,000 users, this has quickly the capability to ramp up to about $3.6 million savings in a single year alone. And we actually have a use case of this that actually demonstrates in a large organization and how much was actually saved. The second use case is, sorry, is the third, my apologies, is proactive access, sorry, asset management. What does this mean? Like, it truly means that as people leave the organization and transfer within departments, and I'll talk about both scenarios more detail. We leverage ServiceNow's user table that's usually integrated with an authentication source like Active Directory, Okta, Azure, something like that. And as people are being offboarded and onboarded, it's being able to see the current status. So if an employee is no longer valid or no longer active in an organization, and it sees that the individual still has assets assigned to them, an email is automatically sent to the manager. And I use, Sean has one of his sales members that are no longer with the organization. Sean would get an email saying, hey, Matt is no longer with the organization. Sean, you need to go to the attestation page and you need to take action against those assets. And what does that look like? I'm actually going to show you very quickly here. And this is where Fran has got an email to go in and basically saying that Sandra is no longer part of our organization. And you'll see the assets that are currently assigned to Sandra. They're less than a normal person because they've already taken some action. But basically what needs to happen by Fran is she needs to go in here and she needs to take action against each one of these assets or hardware or access and basically have them removed or transferred to somebody else or returned, whatever the case may be. Now, Fran will continue to get email notification on whatever the identified amount frequency is configured within the application. Fran will get those notifications until everything is gone. And then at point, once everything is gone, Sandra will actually disappear from this view. Now, the intent here is really to make sure that, your you're removing access is no longer required. Obviously, anything that's integrated with Active Directory, that is non-issue because that's automatically removed. But there is other types of applications that um, might not be dependent on Active Directory directly, and so those need to take action. There's also hardware, mobile phones, computers, and software that the person might have. Now, what we found a lot of times managers tend to do in large organizations is they have an employee that left. Sandra's left. She tended in her laptop and her phone. The manager throws it into a drawer, waits for, hopefully when they hire a replacement, they'll give that equipment to the new person. So two things tend to happen is first of all, they forget that they have that equipment stored in a filing cabinet and they go out order new equipment for that person. Or second, they need to figure out how to transfer those assets to the individual. Now, in the first, there's a proactive measure that basically says, something needs to happen here. You can't just leave those assets dormant. You're forcing the manager to take action against those assets. And in doing so, you're now cleaning up your asset repository. You're recovering assets that can be redeployed, or in this case, Fran might take the decision to send them to an employee that is actually the replacement employee for that individual. The other part in the same section as what we call proactive asset management is transferred. What we look at here are two triggers. If an employee's manager and department have both changed on the same time, and the reason that we look at both because department changes and manager changes individually at a time doesn't mean that the person has left the department. But if both items are triggered a change at the same time, the same action is taken. The only difference that you'll actually see here is that you can say the previous manager is notified, and the previous manager can say the employee kept asset. And so why is that important? Um, Most times your assets are being tracked against a cost center. And the cost center of Maureen here has changed from Fran's cost center to her new department. And by doing so, employee kept asset, now the assets automatically transfer to with Maureen to her new cost center. And that now updates the asset so there's no more legacy charging to an old department. The other where it came into where one organization really took value in this process was that a person had access and was in HR and had access to an application that wasn't managed through Active Directory. When that person actually left HR and went to IT, she had actually retained her HR access, which she shouldn't have. In creating this view to the previous manager that Maureen had actually left the department and now gone to IT, that manager can actually see, hey, she has an HR access that we need to terminate or remove, and now that manager can take action from this interface directly. Okay. Now, what does this look like again? So we had the attestation, we showed the benefit of attestation in dollars. What this is showing actually the benefit of proactive asset management in actually volume and asset accuracy. What we have found in our user groups and our customers that currently have this application, we find a very conservative 1.68% people have either left the organization or actually transferred within departments. Now, this number is conservative. We're still leaving this number. This is pre-COVID number. This number has actually gone up above 2 during COVID and has leveled off again to about a 1.8 since COVID. Obviously, there was a lot of turnover and a lot of changes, but that's we're staying at conservative numbers. So just to demonstrate for you. Now, in an organization of about 50,000 people, that means there's about 1,400 um, employees they've either transferred or left the organization in a single month. Now, if an average employee has about 3.2 assets, hardware, software, and mobile device or multiple software, and then access, and you can see, in Fran's case, I think she had like 11, so that's quite a higher number. But in this case, we're using this 3.2 as an average. You'll actually see that 54,000 assets are impacted by this process in a single year. That means if you don't have a proactive asset management process, that you have the possibility of 54,000 assets not being out of date. That means they're not being properly assigned, or they're still assigned to the old employee, or they're assigned to a person that left the department and never took those assets. So there's a lot of scenarios where a considerable amount of assets can become outdated very quickly. The last use case is basically validating billing accuracy. And as I alluded to in the opening, many organizations are starting to go to a statement of charge to be able to charge their departments for IT assets that they currently have. Most times, a statement of charge basically says, department 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 10 PCs assigned to you, so we're charging you 10 times the unit rate that we currently have, and then that's what your charge is as far as an organization goes. The problem is the business looks at it and says, well, I only have 8 individuals. How am I being charged for 10 laptops? And what this does is creates that transparency to the business to be able to actually see that, Fran had 2 laptops and somebody else down in her department also had 2 laptops. And that's obviously, it just explains, or they can actually take action to help reduce those laptops so they're at a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay. So those were the 4 use cases. I want to be able to go into some of the reporting capabilities and demonstrate how easy it is to add another catalog item to the dropdown that we currently have. And I'll explain what that means. We're at 11:41. So within the administration section, we've added a server to this option. Now, what you'll see here in the very bottom of the page are actually the actions that are available in each of the drop downs within the attestation page. That means just sort. I'm just going to sort here. You'll see for hardware, there's the reassign, and for the hardware, there's a remove, and then there's also a return, which is used on a different catalog item. And it will show you how these are actually leveraged. But what we want to do is look at creating a new one for server. And I won't go through this whole exercise because it does take time, but it truly is a simple interface. And what you're going to be able to do is add the option. You're going to pick a catalog item and then the attestation type. We're going to select it's for hardware. And in this case, we're actually just going to pick a server. So what we're doing is we're actually creating an option that doesn't just hit all hardware, it just hits servers. And the action type is we're going to say reassign. Now, picked that one before. We're going to actually look at transfer hardware. Oops, sorry.
Maybe a good time for me just to pose a question from the field to you, Steve.
Sure.
We have a question asking if the people can mark these as lost or stolen, the assets as well.
So that's a good one. We don't we don't put that on as part of our default. I can tell you 2 of our customers that have actually recently deployed that has actually done exactly that, have created an option for lost and stolen. It's as simple as creating that catalog item, leveraging that lost and stolen, and then making sure that your actions that update the asset inventory reflect the lost and stolen. So yes, you can put those options. And even I've seen, and I'm going to actually jump back to the attestation page. Um, on a mobile device is one of the examples that I can give you, is that we actually created a catalog item with one of our customers to reset the password. They're exclusively a Rogers customer, and basically, if their phone was locked for some reason and they needed to reset the password, they can go in here, they hit password, and then it automatically went to Rogers, and Rogers called and assisted the person to reset the phone if they had an issue with the phone. Same thing could be done with an application or some type of others. So your actions are as limited to what your service catalog is. So yes, very simply, Sean, that can be added. Okay. Any,
Perfect. Thank you, sir. And
no
thanks for the
problem.
question as well.
Yes. So basically, you would have, we're adding a reassigned hardware asset here. Now there's an ROI calculator, which we're going to get into in the next slide actually. And what you're able to do is, in returning the server, you're able to capture savings. Now, it can actually look at the current depreciated value of that server. It can look at if you're leasing, what is the amount that you're paying for that server, and being able to figure out that cost. But what the other part that it does is if you've put automation in place. So if you have automation that basically says that, in automating the transferring of an asset, and you fully automate that process, but you're going to save 15 seconds per request. You would actually configure that here. You put in the average salary of the individual that's performing that, the amount of minutes that are per year. We actually help to pre-populate this, and then the time save. So if it's 10 minutes or 5 minutes or even 2 minutes, what it does then is it figures out the cost per minute and the 2 minutes that's going to save every time this catalog item is executed. And by doing so, you'll actually, I'm just going to jump to our next slide here. What you'll actually start to see is an ROI calculator that be able to tell you that, leveraging the application, you're actually driving savings. You're either through automation or through asset recovery or software recovery that can be reharvested for redeployment. You'll be able to see that. You also see in a simple dashboard any pending attestations, assets that, for transferred users, any offboarded users with assets, and then assets that have individuals have completed attestation. This actually sample here is actually from Coreio directly, and you'll see that we're only leveraging it for leveraging remove group access. We're only tracking savings against that currently. And you'll see that it's, in a single year of just in a smaller organization, we've saved over $123,000 in time savings just in the fact of removing access and fully automating that access with Active Directory. Okay. So in summary, what do I need to have asset clarity? Asset clarity requires, in the store to at least be a Rome release or later. Every organization is at that point. It requires a hierarchy to be built in ServiceNow. That means if you have to have an employee and manager relationship, as most organizations do, due to the fact that you're leveraging approvals, so that that is currently there. You have to have the ability to consume 11 custom tables. That's what's really required as part of this installation. You need a list of asset sources and owners. That means all your assets need to be in the ServiceNow hardware or a software, or if you're going to leverage access management, there's a module that we actually load in as well, and it integrates with your access management to bring in that information. Um, you have to have a scoped application license, a single application license that is required. You have to have the catalog items, as I alluded to through the demonstration. The catalog items that you leverage need to exist, or we can help you to build them as part of our implementation. Um, a documented change to asset approval process. That means, if your assets are being transferred, do you have that documented process that you're looking to achieve? And of course, you have to be using the service portal. I think when we actually started this in probably about 3 years ago. There was people that didn't have the service portal; they had their own portal that's being built. But I think we find more and more organizations are all leveraging the service portal. Now, what are the really two things that are required? Is the installation configuration of the asset attestation. Sorry, the asset clarity widget. There was one thing we rebranded, and we kind of missed that in this one slide. And then if you're going to bring any type of other sources of information like SailPoint, or you have another asset repository that we need to integrate with, and that's also required. The implementation of the module itself is usually about 4 to 6 weeks. It doesn't take very long. Training and education is included in that, so you can fully administrate that post our go live.
Steve, a question I haven't heard before. What if you have assets assigned to an area and not in an individual, where a
Uh,
specific department might use hot seating, meaning multiple users share the work area? How do we handle cases like that? For
good.
example, a
Yeah.
desk might have a dock and two monitors for those users who don't typically work in the office to come in and use.
Yeah, very good question. And we've actually we've came across that a couple of times. And maybe I could even use a branch environment, which is very similar, right? Where you have branch equipment that exists, but are not assigned to the tellers or the individuals working in the branch because there's people that come in and out. In those areas, what we're always recommending is there's an asset owner. In asset management best practice is to always have an asset owner irrelevant of the person is actually using that asset. You should have that asset owner, so that person is responsible for the asset life cycle. Who is that asset owner? Usually in a branch environment, it's either a branch manager or they have a branch admin. In a call center, they have an administration that manages that. I can tell you in a large financial institution, we did the same thing with even conference room equipment, telephones and TVs and any type of equipment that existed. There was always an admin that was always assigned to. So our recommendation is to always assign all assets to individuals so that there's always a responsible individual for that. And that's how you overcome that challenge. Okay. I think one last slide, I believe. Actually, two slides. We wanted to kind of share with you, we kind of walk through some smaller scenarios of cost savings and you know, s- I guess case studies that we've gone through. And this was actually one of the large deployments we have done in a large financial institution, one of the Canadian financial institutions. And this was actually the return on investment in the second year of operation, not the very first year. So I'm being transparent here. But in the second year of operation, there was a savings of $4.8 million total. There was 1.6 million in service request automation where we came in, we helped automate a lot of the service requests and leveraging them through the asset clarity process to be able to generate those. We saved 325 on software licensing reharvest. Now, um, this was only on the primary Microsoft Adobe titles. We didn't go beyond that at the time. That's all they wanted in the attestation page, and that was be able to generate that much savings on those high level titles. There was 220,000 saved in staffing efficiencies, and then $2.7 million on hardware and software and mobile equipment savings. So transitions to $4.8 million saved in a single year. And last, which is a question that we get asked all the time, um, you know, ServiceNow has the Ham Pro that's available. And the question that we're always being asked is, are they, conflicting with each other, and are they, doing the same job? And basically what we want to articulate here, and we've actually met with the ServiceNow product owner and in total agreement, is that the Ham Pro and Asset Clarity actually work better together. um, Ham Pro obviously has further catalog items, further workflow that enables you to be able um, to to update your assets. The problem is that they still exist in just your catalog. The asset clarity now actually exposes those asset catalogs, asset workflows to the end user to be able to take action either through attestation, through proactive asset management, or just self-service. Going in and doing an asset reservation now can be part of your asset clarity. So it's working better together, the two scenarios. So just to summarize, and then I'll wrap up. Again, the four use cases: self-service, forcing annual or monthly, quarterly attestations, proactive access and asset management, basically on triggers and when employee status change, and then validating billing accuracy. With that, I'd like to thank you. I mean, I'll open it up for any type of other questions there might be. But this really concludes the webinar. Sean?
Yeah, we'll give really appreciate everybody attending. Obviously, some great questions. Really appreciate the questions. If there's more, feel free. We'll hang out here for another 60 seconds, let's say. Alternatively, if you think of something afterwards, which I tend to do often, you can send those requests or questions over to myself or Steve or the Coreio team. We'll be more than happy to be able to help you out with that and give the answer. There is something being typed. It might just be a goodbye, Steve, but we'll wait to see what's being typed and then we'll go from there.
Sure, we got a couple minutes.
Yes, and that is a good comment. I have recorded this session, so certainly we will share this with yourselves and make that available for everybody so that they can reference afterwards. Yes, thank you for that question.
Okay.
Okay, so I would say come near the end of the day, I'll get the recording out. I think I cut off Mr. Mifsud. Steve, you were going to say something?
I just want to thank everybody for your time today, and I
Agreed.
look forward to hearing from you.
Agreed. Thanks, everybody, so much. Very
Thank you.
appreciated. Steve, thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.